There's a lot of things that maybe we were afraid to do, but once we did it, we found out it was really fun. Example for me is swimming, right? I was very scared of swimming, but once I started swimming, I loved it. And so sometimes students need the opportunity to find something that they love. We're all a team, and without each other, we're not going to be able to make the students successful. But if we work together, we can.
Absolutely. And it does take a village to raise a child. Welcome, Linwood Unified School District families, to another episode of Beyond the Classroom. We're very grateful that you took time out of your busy day to join us to talk about another important topic. I always say that. I always say this is a very important topic that we don't talk about, but it's true. We want to make sure that all our parents and anyone listening gets more information on how we overcome low self-esteem, right? So that's our topic for today. And as our guest speaker, we have our SEL Specialist that is currently housed at Washington Elementary, Mr. David Castillo. So welcome, Mr. Castillo, to today's episode, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for letting me on here, and thank you, Linwood Unified. I'm here to talk to us about overcoming low self-esteem.
Perfect. So thank you for volunteering and being willing to talk about a very important topic that sometimes as parents, we don't realize that we do certain things that can lower our child's self-esteem. And it's good to hear, it's good to practice, it's good to reflect as a parent, right? So, and that's what these podcasts are for, to bring resources to our families. So Mr. Castillo comes to us with experience in working in high schools and his internship that he did prior to him coming to Linwood Unified. And as I mentioned earlier, he is at Washington Elementary as our SEL Specialist, and I know they love you over there. You have done some amazing things with their students in building their self-esteem in many different ways. So I'm excited to hear some of that as well. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's get started. So what are some common signs that a student is struggling with low self-esteem?
So, working at the elementary level, I know it looks different at all levels because, there's students that are, in TK, sixth grade, but a lot of the, common signs that we see is, for the most part, is, not participating, not wanting to be involved. And that looks different because sometimes, in a classroom setting, right, they're not involved with the teacher, right? They're not raising their hand. They're having trouble working on assignments. And another way we can see as well is, outside during recess or even at home, right, where they are not wanting to be a part of things. So you think of activities that you do at home, right, or maybe going to the store, or maybe doing their homework. If they feel like they're not wanting to do certain things on their own, then that's some signs that we see a lot.
So do you think that they don't want to do it because they think they won't be successful at it? Or what would be some of the reasons why they wouldn't want to be part of? We know it's because their self-esteem is low, but what do you think they're thinking?
So oftentimes what the students are thinking, it varies, but usually it's one that they're afraid of trying new things, right? And maybe it's because when they have done new things in the past, whether, they weren't good at it. So a lot of it is maybe feeling like, I'm not good at it yet, so why should I even bother, right? So a lot of the times they're afraid of, maybe others saying things about, what they're doing. And then another sign that we see also too is that, maybe some things that they notice, or maybe at home where, they tried something new and, they didn't do a good job, or maybe something was said. And so that often makes students afraid, right? So I know sometimes, and even myself, I've noticed where, we want to encourage our students, because sometimes even if they don't do a good job, the fact that they tried doing something new or trying on their own, that's something that we want to support our students. And often at times, when we say, hey, good job, and even if you didn't get it right, nice try, this is going, you tried your best. That's often what students need when trying new things.
And you do a lot of that on the campus because you do work with students in teaching them how to understand their emotions and why they do certain things emotionally or how they feel. What do you see are some challenges that you, as an SEL specialist, face when you are trying to encourage a student to understand their feelings and to try new things and that sort of behavior?
So I notice sometimes when we tie it back to low self-esteem, that sometimes I notice that with students that, like I mentioned before, they struggled in the past, right? And sometimes they use that experience and they relate it to everything that's going to happen. So I give an example with the student I had today, right? I did bad on this test, and so why should I even try? If I did bad already, if I keep trying, I'm not going to do well, right? And oftentimes we have to remind our students that it's kind of like a growth mindset. We'll talk a little bit more later, but that we have to keep trying, and even if things don't work out, things will get better as long as we're trying our best and trying new things, right? But when we're not trying or we give up, that's where our self-esteem stays the same because things won't change. And so oftentimes I have to remind students that, even I make mistakes as an adult, and that's okay. And often sometimes students, maybe families or even other students are not always open with their mistakes. So when they make a mistake, they feel like, this is only me. No one else is experiencing this. So I have to remind my students, like, hey, I make mistakes too. And often when I have that conversation, they're like, oh, it's okay to make mistakes kind of thing? Or like, oh, it's okay. Okay, so maybe I should try or keep on trying. So you have to remind students that, we're not perfect. And also, to let the families know as well that, we have to remind our students that we're not perfect too. And everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And often when students see that, maybe their families or parents are also, make mistakes, then they understand that, it's not just a me thing, it's all of us, and it's a learning part of the process.
Absolutely. Have students shared why they might feel they have low self-esteem? Like, what are some of the experiences that they've had that has caused them to feel like they have low self-esteem?
So I think often when I speak with students is that, in the past that maybe they did something wrong, right? Or they made a mistake. And then instead of being supported in that mistake, either people kept bringing it up, whether it was their friends or maybe some families, they're like, they keep bringing up that mistake. So often, for them, it's like if it's keep being brought up, then it must be something really bad or I'm doing something wrong, right? So often I have to remind my students, and recently it's been a lot of this, maybe because the year is almost over, but that it's okay to make mistakes, and like I said, no one is perfect, but we have to just remind ourselves that we have to keep trying.
How does low self-esteem eventually develop into like a mental health condition? Is that something that you see happen?
Yeah, so more often than not with low self-esteem, so let's just stick with the classroom setting, right? Let's say a student is struggling academically. So, they're struggling academically, that affects them in, wanting to do the work, which one could affect them academically, but also how does that tie into, other aspects of their life? So at the school, let's say they're, struggling, they may feel reluctant or not as open to talk to their friends or maybe talk to their teachers, right? They kind of shut down, they keep things to themselves. And when we get to that point, it's really hard to know how they're feeling, right? Because if they're keeping everything in, everything that we keep inside, it kind of builds and it balloons, right? And so often maybe a small issue, like maybe, struggling on a test, it can evolve into something much more different where every choice that they have or feeling is amplified or much more intense.
Wow. So we designed this podcast for families so they can get resources and support or just even knowledge. What are some of the things that we need to change as family members or as parents or just anyone raising kids to help children not have a low self-esteem?
So one thing I like or that I focus on is like a growth mindset, right? Which is, how we see things, and not just with school, but just how we see the world or maybe how to go about life. And so one thing is that, we can always get better. We have to keep trying and be open to doing new things. So I know often than not, I know I didn't mention it earlier, but another thing that feeds into lower self-esteem is that when students don't get a chance to experience something. So I think of an example of a student, they're saying, at home, they don't get to do much, right? Or they don't get a chance to do chores. They don't get a chance to be a part of the family in certain things that are going on. And so often, if they haven't done that before, they're, if that's at home, which is, a very supportive system, they're more afraid so at a school setting, right, where it's people that they're not as comfortable with. So often we have to kind of include our students, include our families into things that, I know they're kids, right? They're still learning, but if we include them into these different activities or different things that we're doing around the house, that will help support their self-esteem, where, they're exposed to different activities.
Yeah. No, it's true, because we talk about like chores, like you said, chores. Like, the big trash cans that the kids roll outside, like they feel accomplished when they're able to help contribute, and that helps with their self-esteem. So what are things we could do also, or maybe stop doing, that might contribute to a student having low self-esteem?
So going back to the chores or even activities thing, right? When a student or your student does something, and let's say they don't do it right the first time, more often the first reaction for us is to be like, you did it wrong, or it's not supposed to be like that, right? And we want to change that conversation to something more positive with the student. So instead of saying, you did this wrong, you should be like this, be like, oh, good job on trying. I'm glad you helped me, take out the trash. But for next time, we got to make sure that we do it like this, right? So, start it with something positive instead of saying, this is wrong, or this is not how it should be like. Right?
Yeah, you're right. We just aired an episode, I think last week or the week before, on positive behavior interventions, PBIS. And one of the things that we talked about in that one is changing the way we talk, turning things into a positive instead of a negative, because we're so used to talking negative. Like, don't do this, don't do that. Like, instead of saying, do this and do that, so it's all connected, I guess, with everything that we do as parents. It's a hard task to be a parent.
It is hard.
It's hard. There's a lot of things we need to consider, but one of the things that we need to make sure that we do is create a supportive environment for our children. That way they not have low self-esteem. How do you think families can work together to create a supportive environment for children to not have low self-esteem?
So I'm glad you touched on that, because one thing that I've been noticing too is that sometimes students don't feel comfortable sharing, what's going on at school, right? Whether it's with school, with their friends, social, emotionally. And I think one part of building that self-esteem is having that communication with your family, with, that it's okay to tell me this. I'm here to listen. Because I know often, like I mentioned, with whatever, they say, through our experiences, we may have an idea of like how to go about it. But for the students, sometimes they just need us to listen and be there for them and just be like, hey, I'm here for you. And often that helps them build their self-esteem, right? Like if my family is here to listen or they're here supporting me, I'm going to tell them how I'm feeling. And they, whether in just having that space. And I think that's what's important as well.
Yeah, we talk about that. And I think we've recorded about 18 episodes, and in every episode, every guest speaker says the same thing. Communication is key. Listening is key. Listening without judgment. We see that trend right now where everybody's like, okay, listen without judging. Listen without judging. Because I think one of the first things that we do in human nature is judge and criticize. But we need to remember that with kids, they're innocent, they're being built, their mind is growing. And how does that play? How does self-esteem play with friendships and peer relationships? Like, how does that impact how the relationship a child will have with their peers, whether they have low or high self-esteem?
So I know often when students have lower self-esteem, maybe they have a certain group of friends, right? So they're very accustomed or used to what they have. But when students have lower self-esteem, let's say that their friends are not there, or maybe, their teacher's not there, right? It makes it much more difficult for the student to be able, stay on task and do, go through the motions of the school day, right? Like with lunch, even doing homework, or even recess, right? Whereas a student with higher self-esteem, let's say their friends are not here, even the teacher's not here, they're still able to, one, be confident in themselves to, do what they need to do when their friends are not there, when the teacher's not there. And often you can see the difference with students where, more social or maybe more open to making new friends, right? Whereas students with lower self-esteem, once other students are not there that they're used to, it's very difficult for them to transition.
So it's connected to confidence, right? Low self-esteem and having confidence in who you are as a person. What do you think a parent should do if, let's say, they maybe haven't started these habits since they're little, or these, not habits, but the way they talk to their child, the way, and now they're analyzing, they're like, wow, maybe I should change what I do. What would you recommend a parent to do?
So, every household looks different, but I think one thing that's an easy step for us to do is be like, or, say good job, or provide affirmations, because a lot of times that's what student needs, which is, saying you are doing well, you're trying your best, I'm proud of you. These are things that help students, because sometimes, maybe at school they don't hear these things, or maybe from their friends. And so often it starts with us, which, the family, the support system. And, if we remind them and support them in that way, that's a step that we can do all the time. It's a practice that even I do with myself. And it's important to empower our students to do that with themselves, so that eventually, we start with saying, you are great, you are awesome, keep trying, I'm proud of you. And eventually the students will not need us to be saying that. And instead, they'll be the ones telling other students, which is what I see a lot with the students I've been working with that struggled with lower self-esteem. After working in my groups or acting with my lessons, by the end of it, they're the ones telling other students, like, hey, you're doing good, keep trying, it's okay, you got this. And so it starts, I think of it like a domino effect, right? You start with one student, and if your student builds that practice, they can help other students. And down the line, there's other students that may be in that situation we can help with just that one student.
That is so powerful, because one person can't change another, and it really does become a domino effect. And that's the most beautiful thing, when we can build each other up, right? Especially when we're down and we just need that support. It's good to know that we have a community, right, to help each other. So going back to the home and the home life, you said giving children the opportunity to have experiences, listening to them. And we said, did we talk about negative talk?
We talked a little bit about sometimes we focus on the negative of whatever is being done, and how that can add up, because over time, if everything we mentioned is negative, when students are used to being told negative things with feedback from friends or even teachers, their first thought is going to be like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, which is hard to unlearn after a certain amount of time. So just, we're with our families a good chunk of time, so we can make that difference with just those reminders.
What would you say about parents' own trauma transferring down to a child? Like, for example, if a parent has experienced something in their own life and now they're raising kids, and some of that trauma is coming down because of their fear as parents, what would you say about that?
And so, I know that is very common with, parents, students, teachers, and sometimes we have to remind ourselves that, we have our shared experience, we have, our struggles, and we want to, support our students as much as we can. And sometimes with our feelings, with what we experience, if we put that on our students, I know sometimes it's the fear that, I don't want them to experience what has happened to me, or maybe I've been through this, so, I want to help them so they don't experience in that. But oftentimes that makes things more difficult for our students, because often they're hearing negative talk, or, being put down, or maybe, out of fear, we kind of don't expose them to certain ideas or different opportunities, right? And so we have to just remind ourselves that, they're growing, they're learning, and we have to give them that chance as well. And we can use what we experienced to help empower them, whereas instead of using that experience to protect them, well, we are protecting them with that support.
And we need to remember that our trauma is not their trauma. It just isn't. And parents, we need to seek the support if we are keeping our kids in a bubble. It's kind of like, that's what we want to do. We want to protect them. We want to make sure nothing happens to them, but we're affecting them in another way, right? So how can parents and caregivers model self-esteem and for their children? Like, how can they model it?
So another thing that I kind of mentioned about was with mistakes, right? So often when students make mistakes, we often focus and highlight like, oh, you did this wrong, right? And another thing is exposure to mistakes. So, you know, if you have conversations like, oh, I made a mistake, or oh, I did something wrong, but it's okay. Like, you know, so including that you made a mistake, but also having that mindset of, I'm going to be better, I'm going to move on from this, right? And I think often that when students see that, they see that, okay, this is normal. This is something that happens, whereas if we feel like we have to be perfect all the time or, you know, give the best that we can be, that affects our students because they're still learning. So what they expect is, oh, everything is perfect. Everything needs to be like this. But when you expose them to mistakes or, you know, I messed up, but that's okay, I'm going to try, then they understand that that's also part of the journey as well.
I'm so glad you said that because you're absolutely right that a lot of times we want to come across as perfect to our kids and we forget, and we've been talking about this the whole season, that when our kids know we're not perfect, it makes them feel more safe to know that we have challenges too and we have fears too, and letting them know that it's okay to share that, that just helps the child have stronger confidence. You know, and I know one of the things that, like, something that maybe I don't like to do, but my child likes to do, allowing them the opportunity to do it, that will build their confidence. And also seeing them seeing us try new things. And even though we're not comfortable with it, but trying it so you can have that confidence to know, like, look, I'm not comfortable in this, but I'm going to try it to see if I like it. And if I don't like it, I don't like it. Then that way they can experience and model that as well. So is there something that you would want to share before?
As you mentioned that, so, you know, that we're on that topic, that, you know, allow our students for opportunities to try new things. And what I mean by that, I know we kind of mentioned it before, but let's say, I give an example like food, right? Like maybe they want to try something new, right? Like giving them that option, giving them that choice. Because sometimes when they, you know, want to explore new things, they feel if they feel supported, you know, they're more open to try things that you're willing to put on. So I know as parents or maybe as families, you know, we want maybe certain things that we're used to, right? But in order for our student to be successful, we have to allow them to do things that we're not used to. So just a reminder.
And that's so hard to do as parents because sometimes we get scared of the unknown. And we don't want nothing to happen to our kids. But it's actually very, I guess it's a proud. It's something to be proud when your kid wants to explore and try new things, because you want your kids to be better than you. That's what we hear all the time. Like, you have to be better than me. You have to try, you know, different things. So we need to be able to give them the platform to feel safe, supported, and increase that self-esteem. If you, like, going back to, like, parental support, if you see your child, and I don't know if I already asked this, but if you see your child that has low self-esteem, what can you do as a parent to seek support and help?
So, you know, within the household is just making sure, you know, if they're, you know, having low confidence, asking the why, having conversations. I know, like I said, sometimes we say, or maybe sometimes we often think like, why are you sad? Or like, why there's nothing, you know, we often think that because of our experiences, but a lot of times we have to lend the ear and listen, like, why are you feeling like this? Ask some questions, right? And I know often sometimes we're afraid to ask these questions, but the truth is when we ask these questions, it gives the student an opportunity to open up with what they're feeling. And, you know, I know sometimes students just need what we, or the support they need is less is not the word, but much more achievable, or we're able to do, but we wouldn't know unless we ask. So, like for me, a student that I worked with, they mentioned to me, you know, with lower self-esteem. So I asked them, you know, what is it that you need, or what would help you? And when they told me, sometimes I just want to hear like good job, or like, you know, just, that, or I just need,
Simple.
something simple, right? And so, for me, prior to that conversation in my head, I was like, oh, maybe this is going on. But when I spoke with the student, it was clear, right? And I think it takes time. But, when you build that relationship and support your student, then, their needs and what they need to be successful with their self-esteem, they will tell us with time.
What would you tell a parent that would say, well, I feel like I don't have the tools to help my child because I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like I never had that growing up, so I don't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell that parent?
So a good thing about our district or in general, we have SEL specialists at the elementary level. We have different teachers. We have a lot of support systems in place. So often, if we don't know, that's okay. And that's part of learning, but we can always ask the school, could ask our SEL specialist. We can also help provide you resources and tools because, often you may feel like you're alone, but after working with so many students and parents, you're not alone. But what we need to do is, be okay with asking for help.
Be okay with asking for help. Yeah, because and it's very true. We're not alone. And it's very common. We don't know the answers. Even us as professionals that we are exposed to LCSWs, SEL specialists, all these support services, that's one thing. Like I'm a director here, but at home I'm a parent. And sometimes I'm giving parents advice on things that when I'm dealing with it, I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? It's just different because when it's your child, your emotions get in it and things change. So I do appreciate you saying that because it's good to seek advice. And I seek it all the time when I am going through my parent struggles and I ask our SELs, I ask our LCSWs. So parents, if you are in need of support, any type of support, please reach out to our schools because just like Mr. Castillo said, we do have support services. Before we end today's podcast, what are 3 tips that you would give parents on how to make sure that their child has high self-esteem or help them overcome their low self-esteem as we end today's podcast?
Okay, so for tip number one that I have for parents is just to remind themselves or to allow students to make mistakes. So one tip is just, when students make mistakes, we have to be supportive, right? Provide a growth mindset. It's okay that we didn't get it. It's okay. Just keep trying. I'm here for you. Providing that support because oftentimes that's what students need. Tip number 2, allow students to be more creative, take a risk, right? I know often, like we said, sometimes we're afraid and that's okay, right? But, we don't want that to impact our student and their future. So often we want to allow them to try new things. And even if we don't agree or maybe we don't understand, we still want to support them because oftentimes there's a lot of things. I had this analogy with students. There's a lot of things that maybe we're afraid to do. But once we did it, we found out it was really fun. Example for me is swimming, right? I was very scared of swimming, but once I started swimming, I loved it. And so sometimes students need the opportunity to find something that they love, and that will help their self-esteem.
Yeah. Do you have a number 3?
I'm trying to think, because those are the big ones.
Yeah, I would say seek support.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would say to parents is seek support if you need it.
Yeah, and then for tip number 3 is, as I mentioned before, right, we're all learning and it's okay to ask for help and being able to reach out to, whether your school, your teachers, your SEL specialists, that's important because we're here to help support you and your student. And oftentimes we're with the student so much that we can help give you resources, give you tools so that you can help support your students because, we're all a team and without each other, we're not going to be able to make the students successful. But if we work together, we can. Absolutely.
And it does take a village to raise a child. So we want to thank you for coming today and speaking on overcoming low self-esteem and how to help parents and all of us just build it up and make sure that we're all confident, individuals so we can work together. So thank you, parents, for joining us today, and we appreciate you taking your time. Again, if you are in need of support services, please reach out to your local school. We have SEL specialists, LCSWs, and a lot of other support services for you and your families. So again, thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.